Okay, today we're going to look at the large intestine, and that's the only part that we'll look at today. So remember last time we talked about the small intestine, lots of digestion, very long and skinny organ. The large intestine is not as long as the small intestine, but it's larger around. Its circumference is bigger, so that's why it's called the large intestine. Large intestine is very important in absorbing water, taking water out of digested materials, electrolytes that your body might still need, and then that's where your feces are actually formed. And that absorption of water is very important in how digested material is going to pass through your large intestines. So the large intestine is named because its diameter is larger than the diameter of the small intestine. Like I said, the small intestine is actually a longer organ. It is only about 1.5 meters long. And when we look at the diagram, you'll see it is not straight. It is going to come up, over, and down. So here, as we look at the picture, ileum, so right here is where your small intestine empties into the large intestine. So digested, a lot of waste is going to enter here. Here is that ileocecal sphincter muscle. And then here is the little opening into the appendix. So as you see, when food enters the large intestine, there's a little blurb on the bottom. The food or digested material needs to go up the ascending colon, across the transverse colon, and then down the descending colon. So what happens is sometimes food can get caught down in here or down in your appendix, and people who have had appendicitis, have your appendix removed, some of that waste material doesn't get moved up where it's supposed to go, and it stays down in this area. Also, sometimes your colon will form extra like pouches kind of down in this area. Colon cancer, they can remove large portions of your colon if someone has colon cancer, and polyps can be produced inside of the large intestine. When we're looking at wastes and feces, very full of bacteria. So you do not want this waste sitting in your colon or large intestine for very long, because it's full of bacteria that's not really the good bacteria. So it can be harmful if it sits there for a long period of time. So people who are not very regular or have constant battles with constipation, things like that, that is not good for your large intestine. A big thing out now is probiotics and how that's good for your digestive system and keeps things moving. Also, your intake of water is very important for keeping things moving. So appendix, right down here at the bottom of the large intestine where it starts, and then it's going to go up ascending, transverse, descending. This little S is the sigmoid, and then it ends up being the rectum is the last short part before the anal canal and leaving through the anus. So the large intestine consists of the cecum, and that was the pouch at the beginning of the large intestine. The appendix projects off of the cecum. And then the colon itself, ascending, transverse, descending, and sigmoid, the little S part. The rectum and anal canal are the last couple of areas before it leaves. The anal canal is what opens to the outside as the anus. The anal opening, or the anus, is guarded by involuntary internal anal sphincter, and then there's a voluntary external anal sphincter. So what this means is that when someone defecates, the internal anal sphincter you don't have control over. The external anal sphincter you do. It is voluntary and you have control over that muscle. So if we kind of look at the bottom part of this again, Here would be the rectum and then the anal canal. Notice they also have folds here, and sometimes that's another area where bacterial feces can sit for a long time and cause problems. So even just the inside shape can sometimes lead to bacterial buildups and things like that. So the internal sphincter is on the inside, external is on the outside, and those I probably won't have. This diagram probably will not be on your test. The large intestinal wall has the same 4 layers as the rest of the alimentary canal. However, it lacks a lot of the features of the small intestinal mucosa layer like villi. Your large intestine does not absorb nutrients. It absorbs water and some electrolytes, but it doesn't do a lot of absorbing. Therefore, it doesn't have those little villi to help absorb things. Fibers of the longitudinal muscle are arranged in tenacoli that extend the entire length of the colon, creating those pouches that I had just kind of pointed out, and they're called haustra. So those little pouches are kind of found throughout your large intestine. An example of, we had a dog that would, we have sheep, and if our dog ate a dead lamb, it would get some of the wool in its digestive system. And in these pouches, that wool would sit in those pouches because it's not digested very well. And it ended up causing digestive problems because that wool would not move through the alimentary canal. Large intestine does not digest, so no digestion is taking place, no absorption of nutrients, like I said, absorption of water and electrolytes. It does still secrete mucus because that helps move the feces through, so that mucus secretion is very important. It does absorb electrolytes and water. It contains important bacteria as far as breaking things down yet. So they synthesize or make vitamins, K, B12, thiamine, riboflavin, and then it's use cellulose for raw materials. So some of the bacteria that's in your large intestine helps to synthesize or make vitamins. Movement in the large intestine, similar to those of the small intestine, not as segmented as the small intestine is. There are still peristaltic waves that happen only 2 or 3 times during the day. So that would be, peristaltic wave in the large intestine would be a large movement of the mass. Defecation is removing of the feces. So defecation is stimulated by a reflex, and that reflex forces feces into the rectum, and once it's in the rectum, it can then be expelled. So when the feces is up higher in the colon or the large intestine, it's not going to be released until it actually enters the rectum before it can be expelled. So feces, when somebody defecates, they're composed of undigested material, so stuff your body can't break down or does not need, water, electrolytes, mucus, and then intestinal cells and bacteria. And like I said, when someone urinates, very little bacteria. It's not nearly as gross as feces. Feces has a lot of bacteria in it. Both the color of the feces and its odor is due to action of bacteria and the materials that someone has eaten. So that's something that you might notice if you eat, like a lot of sweet potatoes or a lot of Oreos. Different types of food can affect the color and the odor of your feces. And I'll stop there, but the one thing I do want to add with that absorption of water, if your intestines don't absorb enough water, so enough water is not taken out, you're going to have diarrhea. So if food passes, when someone is sick, food goes through your digestive system too quickly, the water is not absorbed and it's going to come out as diarrhea. If you don't drink enough water, some people just don't absorb, or they absorb more water. Feces stays in their intestines longer. If that water is not, or if too much water is taken out, it sits there too long, that's going to lead to constipation, and then the feces is hard and packed and does not move nearly as well. So the large intestine is very important in having proper bowel movements and making sure that everything passes the way that it should.